Hi there. So I'm here today with Catherine Watkin of Selling from the Heart. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Marianne. Great to be
Good. It's great to be here because we're going to talk about something that I actually haven't seen talked about before. And it's about being a highly sensitive person or an HSP. So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, someone who takes things to heart, who feels things maybe a little bit more than other people. What happens if you're an HSP who is running your own business or who wants to run your own business? What happens when it comes to sales? So we're going to talk about a topic that, all HSPs will come across if you run your own business, and that is doing sales, with heart, with integrity, but effectively when you're an HSP. So, Catherine, I'd like to hear a little bit about you in terms of your experience. You're someone with decades of experience in sales in various roles. You've been teaching this really effectively for a while. So people might be surprised to hear that you identify as a sensitive person, because that's not how we think of salespeople, is it?
No, it's not. And there is this myth that goes around in traditional sales, which is, and I used to hear this when I worked in sales in the corporate world, which is that you have to be thick-skinned to be successful at sales. And I'm sure, a lot of people listening might have heard that. And then they come to think, oh, if I'm going to get clients, I've got to be thick-skinned. And I've got to do these things that make me feel uncomfortable. I have to learn these techniques that actually make me feel a little bit sick when I'm told I've got to do them. And when I look back at, at my career in sales, I have always been highly, highly sensitive. But I think that was what meant that it was very important to me to treat people with respect, to not sell them things that they didn't really need. And what I've come to see through myself, but also through the students that I work with through my programs, is that actually to be really good at sales, it helps to be highly sensitive. It helps to be someone who can pick up on other people's energy, who is a bit of an empath maybe, who is super sensitive to the subtleties of what somebody might be giving off without actually saying it verbally. And so the funny thing is, although as anyone who's a highly sensitive person or an introvert, the idea of sales often completely turns them off, but in actual fact, they are more able to make those connections and really respond to what the client needs than anybody else.
I agree with you. I agree. It's what you said there is really interesting, that I've done quite a few interviews written over the years on being a highly sensitive person, because I did a video on it a few years ago and people picked up and said, oh, that's unusual, highly sensitive person in business. We'd like to talk about that. And a few people I know who run groups for highly sensitive people say, it's full of people saying, but I can't run a business if I'm highly sensitive. And I was like, but it's an advantage. The way you and I run our business is as highly sensitive people, and because we understand, and all of you watching, if you're watching this and you're a high sensitive person, what you have an advantage is that you understand how people feel, because you feel a lot. So you get what it's like to feel. You can read that room, you can read that person, you can even read someone before you've even seen them. You can imagine how they'll feed back on something. And I think that's a huge advantage, because most of the work, I believe, Catherine, of marketing and of sales, which is a big part of anything that you do as a solopreneur, a small business owner, is understanding what the other person's thinking and feeling. And if you're highly sensitive, you do that without even trying. That's what you do. You go through the world with this antenna that is on all the time. And it's the way that I've seen it done really successfully, and I see Catherine do it really well, is to harness the positive parts of that, and the question that we should talk about in a moment is, while not getting completely knocked by the negative things that we also pick up. So maybe let's talk a bit about the positive side of it first, before we go to, wait a second, what happens when you get completely knocked because you're feeling a negative feeling, or you've been really hard on yourself. But let's talk about the positive side here. So something I've picked up a lot, and something I talk about in my book and in my courses and things, is about this idea of getting psychic, about how when you're trying to work out how to communicate with someone in a sales conversation or in copywriting or whatever it is for your marketing, the first step is to almost crawl into their heads and understand how they feel, so that when you say something, they're like, are you psychic? So that's why I call it getting psychic. As a highly sensitive person, what's your experience been of doing that for your clients? Do you think from their perspective quite easily, for example?
Do you know, it's so funny that you use that phrase, because I've never heard anybody else use it, but that is exactly how I have always described the way that I sell. And even when I was working in the corporate world in a very cutthroat environment, I wasn't aware of business. Certainly wasn't aware of phrases like authentic sales or heart-centered sales.
Yeah.
That's how I used to describe it. I used to say
Ah.
that when I was selling to someone, and let's remember as well that we have to change the perspective of what we mean by the word sales, because sales doesn't mean making somebody say yes to you. Sales means something completely different. That when I was selling, I used to tell people that's what I did, that I crawled inside people's heads. Like I literally felt that I climbed inside people's heads and I saw the world through their eyes, and I understood what they needed. And I understood if what they needed was not what I had to offer as well. And I still feel that way. Like when I'm in a sales conversation with a client, it feels very, very deeply connected. I need to ask a few questions, and so it's not completely psychic. I have to ask a few questions, but usually just a few questions, and it's like boom, I'm inside, I understand. And if I don't, I'll ask more and more questions until I really am, and it's exactly that. It's a really weird phrase and I've never heard anyone else use it, but yes, I crawl inside their head.
I reckon it's an HSP thing. So everyone watching, this is our phrase. We get psychic because we can't help it. Like
Yeah.
we live in people, we live in people's heads on a day-to-day basis. And something you said there I want to pick up on. You said sales is not about making people buy. I mean, firstly, we all have a sense of relief, right? If you've heard Catherine talk before, she has said that quite often. But people who maybe haven't heard you talk about that, what do you mean by that? If it's not about making people buy, what is it about?
It is about, you see, if you come from the traditional sales perspective, so say you're a salesperson and you're in a target-driven job and you've been given scripts and training and your job is to get out and close as many sales as you possibly can. When I worked in the recruitment industry, it was like this. If you missed your target for 1 month, you got a written warning. If you missed your target for the second month, you got a verbal warning. And if you missed your target for the third month, you were out. And I worked with men with families, mortgages, children. So you can imagine there was nothing in their approach that was about anything but survival for themselves personally. But actually there is a truth of that in certain areas of sales. But for me, sales is not about what's right for my agenda. It's about what's right for the person who is in front of me. And in front of me is usually on the phone or Skype. And it's really interesting because I haven't connected before why that is. And we can maybe come to that as well.
Yeah.
Because it's connected to the HSB thing. But for me, sales is about helping somebody to come to a decision about what is right for them and what is best for them. And at the moment, for example, my Get More Clients Saying Yes program is open for enrollment. And, some people, I have an online business, so some people buy online, but some people are booking in because they want to speak to me first. So every day at the moment, I'm having 2 or 3 fairly quick, not in-depth sales conversations, but fairly quick conversations with people. And I am saying to some of those people, no, I don't think that you should do this. I don't think this is right for you. Yesterday, I was on Skype with a lady and I sent her the link via Skype to somebody else's sales page because what she needed wasn't what I had. That's sales. That's
I do that all the time, by the way. I completely get it. Yeah.
And that lady, she's bought me fully anyway, because now she's emailed and said, once I've learnt this bit that I need to learn next, I'm going to be back and I can't wait to do your course next year. And I had other conversations with people where it was so clear to me that they needed what I had, and I believe wholeheartedly in the value of the work that I do. And I made strong recommendations to people if I thought they should go ahead, but it is still always ultimately their decision, and I respect that. But what's painful for people is being in indecision. So, and I'm sure a lot of people listening will relate to this. Maybe you've seen something you want to buy, or you've seen a program you want to invest in, whether it's a business program or some personal coaching or a new sofa or a holiday. And maybe it's a bit of a stretch for you financially and you're not quite sure if it's the right thing. There's always lots of things we can do with our money and our time. Is it really the right thing? Should I be doing it? sometimes you can be in painful indecision like that for literally weeks. And it's not a healthy place to be in. And what a lot of people are doing in their businesses is they don't know how to be the guide, to help guide and coach somebody to come to their own decision. And then the person is left. So if I wasn't good at guiding these, the people I'm speaking to at the moment about joining my program or not, they'd be going off and they'd remain confused and feeling under pressure until the deadline closes. Whereas they're getting off the call with me and they're clear, like, yeah, thank you, Catherine, I'm going to go sign up now, or thank you, Catherine, I feel clear it's not right for me right now. And it's that helping somebody make a decision. And I think the other thing as well, which can put a lot of people off the idea of sales, is that if you've come to believe that sales is about making people say yes, and you are highly sensitive, of course you're going to feel sick when you have to do it, because you're sensitive. You don't want to force people to do things that they're not ready for. And so sometimes it's the actual thinking, the way someone's thinking about sales and what sales is, that's the bigger part of the problem. Because if you understand that it's just a very connected, very nurturing, very supportive conversation, one where you actually do more listening than talking. That was what somebody said the other day, which was, it's such a relief to find that sales is more about listening, because I'm an introvert and I don't want to have to do all the talking.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Perfect. Yep. I agree with those things. So moving on from that, you talked for a moment there about how your sales conversations are over Skype and the phone. Before we talk about that, I just want to share my own things. Obviously, as a highly sensitive person as well, for years, I have sold primarily through words on a website, so we've been different in that regard. I also do have sales conversations almost accidentally, like for my mentorships and things like that, where I want to interview someone before I work with them. So I never even thought of it as a sales conversation. I just wanted to interview them to make sure we were a fit. So I think that's another way of looking at it. But primarily, I'd say 90%, 95% of my stuff has been through writing, through emails, and I believe you can read an email to see between the lines and email back. However, my work up until the last year, from 6 months into my business up until last year, I did no face-to-face work at all. Now, you guys all know this, the whole free-range humans, totally virtual. Now, a little back behind the scenes before I tell you my version. I think Catherine will have a version for hers as well. My version was, sure, I want to travel, but I couldn't be in the same room as my clients because I picked up all their energy. So it was like the whole free-range thing was a total HSP accident, because I was like, well, it's much better when I'm not there because I'm just completely knocked. I'd had all the training. I knew how to get knocked, but I still got knocked, right? So I'd be in a room full of people who didn't know what to do with their lives, and I would just feel all their pain. And I was like, I cannot do that anymore. And so I had to put a barrier up. I had to start doing stuff online, and I found that I could talk to people better if I wasn't in their room feeling their energy. I would be better off if it was just on the phone, because I couldn't even, it was too much for me to even see them. I know it sounds really weird, but I'm super, super sensitive to people. And apparently it's not good to be like all teary when you hear someone talk about something and you'd be like, I know you're saying that, but I can feel all the other things. So I was like, let's just put a barrier up. Anyway, so I did that for years. And now I'm at this stage where I realize that for people who have established businesses, who have already, even if it's just they've had their first bunch of clients or they've been in business for a while, and they want more work on doing stuff as them, I am better off in the room with them. One of my friends said, you do like intuitive strategy. And I was like, well, I'm not going to brand it like that, but that's what I do. And it's HSP. Once again, I sit in the room with someone, but who's done work on themselves already. So I'm not just like spilling out into their whole energy. I'm just doing some work, someone who's done work on themselves already. And I'm literally looking at them and listening and listening and listening. And then boom, I've got their business strategy because it fits who they are. But I say that because we are talking about sales, and we're going to talk in a moment about how that sort of block that sort of stuff sometimes when you're in HSP and what that means. But I also think it's important when you're selling something to not feel that nervousness that sometimes we feel, and we're like, but then I'm going to have to, especially if we want to work with that person directly. So I think it's a really good thing to consider how you're delivering something if you're an introvert or a highly sensitive person, and also how you're having your sales conversations, that you don't have to have everything sitting in person, like holding someone's hand, looking into their eyes, if that's going to knock you. You don't have to have something in a big group if that's going to knock you. You don't have to sell off a webinar if you're really, really going to hate that. But you also don't have to sell one-to-one if that makes you more nervous. There are so many ways to deliver and also sell that's going to suit your version of sensitivity, because we all have versions of sensitivity. So, Catherine, with that intro, you mentioned around this topic, doing your stuff on the call. Is that to do with being sensitive, highly sensitive, do you think? Or...
Yeah, and I think it's only this week that I've realised, because I've always done my sales conversations over the phone and over Skype, and actually it's how I do my mentoring as well.
Yeah.
I do live events for my higher end mentoring group, but like you said, they're more established. They've usually gone through my more introduction level programs, and they're fairly established. They're getting clients. They're a little bit more secure in themselves. But my sales conversations, like, I wouldn't do one in person. I just wouldn't. I never would. I never have. And it never really occurred to me to question that too much. I just thought, I think I've always felt like the distraction of having somebody in front of me. But I think what it is that because I'm highly sensitive, when I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm basically being psychic, crawling inside their head, I need, like, all my focus goes on that. I almost don't need to see them.
Yeah.
And actually seeing them becomes a distraction from tapping into them. But because I'm highly sensitive, something else happens as well, because I start to respond to what I see visually. And what I see visually might be different. So the person might be sharing something and I can pick up the deeper thing that they're actually not saying. But if they're looking at me in a certain way, or they've got a confident gesture about them, or a defensive gesture, or they look a bit irritated, the sensitive part of me responds to that first and isn't available to tap into the psychic piece. And so I'm so much better. And it's the same with my mentoring. My clients turn up for Skype calls all the time with the video on. And I say to them, it's fine for you to have your video, but, I'm not going to put mine on, because I don't do my best work when I can see the person.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Mm. This is why I'm glad we're having this conversation. Because, who else says this? You have permission to do it your way. And also to change, over time, like now I'm in this weird place where I need to be, like, my mentorship is stronger than anything else I've ever done. And I couldn't have done it 5 years ago. Now I need to be sitting with someone. I'm like, oh, I see you. I see where your strategy is. It's so obviously there. You're just there. Like, I can see it in front of me. And I think the thing with HSP, just to take a practical point out of what we just said, is part of the definition of highly sensitive person is that your antenna is so much stronger. We feel more, we sense more. And so sometimes we need to reduce, as Catherine said, our inputs, because we get, 10 times more from one input than someone gets from loads. I can read an email and sort of read between the lines of that email. Well, sometimes I'll have to ask one more question, but I can usually close a sale via email, because my thing is words, and I'll be like, oh, I see what that's happening here, and it'll be done. So think about yours. We all have a different version. What is it that you pick up on as an your highly sensitive person? And how do you put yourself in an environment where you get just the right amount of that? To understand how to guide someone to a decision, which is what we've just discovered sales is actually about. Mm. Isn't that? I think that's so much more interesting and useful than saying, how do I convince someone to buy? It's saying, firstly, how do I guide someone to a decision, which is a great line, and also how do I get myself in a position to understanding what's going on with them in a way that is just enough information for me to work with without being sidelined by it.
Yeah, and I think as well, I don't know if you do this, but sometimes when you're in a sales conversation with a client, they do want to pour everything out. Yeah. You might be talking about one thing, but everything's connected for them. If they're particularly sort of fraught or anxious with things, it just all comes tumbling out. And I think if we're highly sensitive, not physically meeting the clients for those meetings really helps, because we're not physically picking up on that energy. And also we have to zone it out a little bit. Like I can get the story without the story. And so rather than listening, and this might sound terrible, so if anyone's listening who has ever poured out their heart and soul to me, then I'm sorry, but I tend to, and it's not that I'm not listening, it's not that I've switched off and I'm looking at my messages on my phone or anything, but it's almost zoning out to the story so that I don't buy into it and get upset by it. Like I can hear, it's almost like there's a background noise. Another friend of mine in business said to me recently, she was talking about something similar where she said, you know, when you've just got like, there's a background noise, it's like a hum, 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 hum. And every now and then there's something that like stands out, boing, and that's the relevant piece. And it's almost like all the story and the pain is the background noise. And then there are these points that just pop up. And those are the bits that we need to hear if we're going to help
I
them.
do it too. I've never heard anyone. It's just like a little like looking in on a chat between friends. I'm like, I've never admitted that. That's what I do. Like I listen to someone's story, I could hear them going into it, and I'm like, I have to back out because if I go in, I'm not going to help you. Because if I'm in there with you,
and this is great because if we are going to be sucked, you know, as not just as people in a sales situation, but for many of us, at the point when the person buys from us, we're actually entering into a relationship where we are actually going to be serving them in a more intimate way in some way, whether it's through coaching or emotional work, or whether it's helping them with their business or their finances. It's still intimate on a certain level. And that, I can't remember where I was going with that, but yes, that we
need to have the...
Yes, that if we allow ourselves to buy into their story, we can't help them to rise above it. So we do have to be a little bit impermeable to the story in order to be able to hold this higher vision. Because I often feel that's really what I do with my clients. I do a huge amount of absolutely very, very practical work with my clients. Very practical, very, very grounded. But actually what I really, really do is I hold a really high vision for them of who they really are at their highest potential, and I help them close that gap. And I simply could not do that if I listened to all of their stories about why they cannot be that person.
Yeah, that's 100% it. 100%. So I want to move on quickly now and talk about the other half of this. We talked about, this is the positive side. This is, we have an advantage. We can get psychic. We can understand people. But, as we just hinted at, we can also get knocked, and I think the two ways I think we should be good to focus on here is, one, we get knocked by our own performance and our own perceived performance, and two, we get knocked by people's emotions and their feelings as well. And let's focus this in on sales conversation. Have you had either or both of those happen to you?
Yes, sorry. And I was just thinking there's an extra thing I'd love to talk about here, which is another negative, which is the negative effect on the potential client when you're too psychic. And I'd like to
Let's start there. That sounds really interesting. Yeah.
So when you can do what Marianne and I do, which anyone who's listened to this who identifies with this highly sensitive will also be able to do this, is that your client doesn't have to say very much to you at all before you've got it. They might give you a couple of sentences or a few lines of email, and you get it. You get where they're at.
I think I see you. Yeah.
And the downside of this can be that we can be too quick to say, yeah, I get it. I can help you. This is how I can help. And the client doesn't feel like you've really heard them yet. And so one thing that I would advise, if you do find that you're somebody that just really gets it very quickly, but then gets confused because you find you don't understand why you're not able to communicate that you can help, it's that you might get it totally within the first 3 minutes, and you still need to give them 10 minutes just to talk. Otherwise they think, who are you to tell me what I need? You don't understand, you haven't listened. And that's the risk of being of getting it too quickly. So you do need to, there's almost like a ritual you need to go through where you do need to allow them to talk a bit, because it's part of their process, even if it's not part of yours.
I think I want to add to that, because I think that the next risk related to that is, someone comes to you with thinking they have a particular problem, and you can totally see that that's not their real problem.
Absolutely.
I know. Now, there's this fine line, and I love your input on this. For me, if that happens, I have to make a decision in that moment. Sometimes I feel it's best to actually call it out and say, look, this has all happened. This seems to really be about this other thing. And then sometimes I'll be like, wow, yeah, totally. But there's times where I feel that's not appropriate, that is almost... that's me going, that's like session 3. Like, that is not right now. So do you agree that sometimes there's times to say it and sometimes there's times to hold it because they're not there ready to hear it yet?
And this is exactly why a highly sensitive person is better at sales. Exactly.
You
And
heard
the
it here first, guys.
focus,
Highly
yeah.
sensitive people better at
Yeah,
sales. Agreed.
because exactly what you said. Sometimes the person comes to you and you can see that issue is not the issue, but you also can just sense that if you try and address it there and then, you're going to push them away, but you are the one who can help them, and that all they need is to come into your world. If they buy into your first program and you build the trust and they learn a few things, that there's a journey. And I can often see when people join me, I can see that they're just setting the first step on a journey, and I can see that even they have got no idea what's coming, but I know they're not ready for what they really need, and I just encourage them to trust me and take the first step on the journey. And other times, you're right, just intuitively we go, you're saying all of this, but what I'm really picking up is this. And they go, oh my gosh, you're so right. And then they usually cry, and then you have a conversation, and somehow, and that's the stuff I can't teach. So when I in my programs, I teach a lot of quite practical, like how to conduct these conversations. But the very final module is called the Art and Science of Sales. And it pretty much says, right, now I've taught you the structure and the science, but there's a whole piece I can't teach you, which is how you use your intuition, and you blend your intuition with what I'm teaching you. And that at times there's something that I've taught you, which is what you do at this point, and you sense that's not what that client needs in that moment. And so it's about learn this structure and then learn how to trust yourself within it.
I'm laughing, Catherine, so we might be the same person. I have literally half an hour ago come off a call where I said, I've just taught you the science of this, but there's this art, and there's going to be some things I've said that won't. I'm just like, seriously, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's true. This is it. And I've struggled, like, just to put the cards on the table, I have struggled over the years. I've created programs, I've taught people, and I actually think it's non-highly sensitive people that I've struggled with when they put something out there and you're like, but it's just wrong, and I know you followed the rules, but it's not empathetic. I can't. How do I teach you that? I've done all the tricks, and I think HSPs, you're watching this because you're an HSP. There's something we can't teach people who aren't like you, and you do it already. What Catherine can teach you, and what I teach in a sort of a strategic way, is the parts of harnessing what you do naturally. So I really want to emphasize, no matter how much you might be told or feel, it's a bit harder as an HSP. Well, yeah, it's hard, but everyone has a thing they've got to deal with. But I actually think we have such an advantage because you have the unteachable bit. Of all the bits you want to have, you want the unteachable one to be innate, and you've got it because you cannot teach that. People will spend years learning tactics to get half as good at understanding people as you do when you're walking down the street. So all that we're doing is putting that in a structure and a model and an approach that it's not just spilling everywhere, it's now focused. And you understand, like Catherine's really great example. Oh, wait a second, just because you can see what someone's thing is, let's not always call it out. There's going to be a time and a place for that. And that's a really good one to have called out. And can we talk a little bit about you and me and the person doing the sales now in terms of our sensitivity, like what happens when it sort of turns on us?
I guess that, you see, I have been doing this for a very, very, very long time. I was 23 when I first started in sales, so I've had many years in which to get very comfortable. And so one of the things that I know troubles a lot of people can be the no, because they take the no as the rejection. And there's a whole piece there, that I always cover with my students to help them to sort of reframe that for themselves so that they're not seeing a no as a negative thing. And I don't. So no's just, they're no's. But there's so much we can talk about here, though. I can go off in so many different directions. And actually, I find that when because I do my sales calls and my sales approaches with sensitivity, I have never had a situation ever that I can even think of in any part of my career or my business where I've had a negative, something like a negative backlash, like I've upset somebody or they're angry with me or anything like that. The overwhelming feeling is always, thank you, Catherine, that was amazing. And I have people who decide not to go ahead with my programs or to not go ahead, who will send me messages afterwards saying, thank you so much. It's that the sales conversation should be something that's very nurturing and very positive. And it doesn't matter if the person says no, you have to be okay with no. Everyone's got to be okay with no. I always say that the client has to, that if the client's going to feel safe enough and comfortable enough to say yes, they have to feel safe enough and comfortable enough to say no. And I also believe that if we, as the business owner, are not genuinely, truly, completely comfortable with no, that it's very hard for the client to feel comfortable saying no. And a lot of this comes down to, there's whole stuff here about rejection, and this is, from an evolutionary perspective, we are programmed to fear rejection because in evolutionary terms, it means rejection from the tribe and it means certain death. So we are programmed to not want rejection. So there is something there. But there's also being able to understand, it doesn't feel like rejection if you can say, hand on heart, I guided somebody through this conversation and I did everything right and they decided to say no. And so we can look at, well, what, sometimes you can be like really heartbroken because this person needed your help and you're so frustrated because you couldn't communicate to them why they did it. And then that's a time for reflection. Where did I let that person down by not taking them through a sales conversation that led them to see why this is so valuable? But sometimes, on the other hand, there are people who need us desperately, but for all sorts of reasons, they're not ever going to get help. And for some people, they have a vested interest in hanging on to their problems because they wouldn't have anything else to talk to. It's part of their identity. And so even, I guess to put it in a very nutshell, you will never get 100% of people saying yes. And if that's what you expect, you're always going to feel a little bit bruised by your sales conversations. And you've got to be, a really great salesperson might get sort of, 6 or 7 out of 10 people saying yes to them. That's still 3 or 4 people who say no.
And just speaking in context, guys who don't know Catherine here, she's really good at this. We're talking about the sensitive side, but you're really good. You've got good conversions. But I just want to make that clear because I think sometimes when we hear this, we're like, yeah, but like, what about the bit where you sell? And it's like, well, actually, I think what I'm hearing you say, what I've seen you do, is with that comfort in hearing the no, you're able to be more present. And because I feel like there's this integrity piece here where, integrity is like the value, like my highest value, and I think it's one of your highest values too. When you know that if it hadn't been right for them, you'd have said it. I feel when I'm in that situation that I am then as clear and able to say, look, this actually really is right for you. And I can say that with integrity because I just told someone else it wasn't. Like you can, for yourself, you're then in that position to say, yeah, if I tell, even if it was half and half, even if you told half the people it wasn't for them, and that's very high rate, right? And half the people it was, I think you, as a highly sensitive person, you would do better in your sales because you would come through it with such clarity and you'd really listen. I don't think you will get that higher rate. I don't think that is what happens, in reality, right? You don't talk to half the people who bother to get on the phone with you or email you and go, that's not for you. But yeah, it does shift your energy a bit, doesn't it?
But it does happen, and I think it's so rare for me. If I'm talking about my higher end program, so my 1-to-1 mentoring or my 12-month mentoring program, so we're looking at investments ranging between £3,000 and £10,000. So I'm having proper. If people are joining my online program, I have a quick 10-15 minute. Is it right for you? Is it not right for you? But if I'm having a real in-depth sales conversation with somebody, it just practically doesn't happen that if I really truly can see that they need to work with me and that they're going to benefit, it just doesn't happen that they don't go ahead, or it would be very, very rare. And if they don't go ahead, I understand exactly why it is. And I get it. I might agree with them. I might disagree with them, but I still understand it.
Right.
And I will tell them that I disagree with them as well. But then I still respect their fight. I think ultimately we've got to move away from this traditional sales approach of trying to almost like browbeat somebody until they say yes to us. Like these are human beings we're talking about. People have got every right to decide to not work with us if that's what they choose. All we're responsible for is guiding them through a conversation that if it is right for them, they can see that clearly. And we don't have to come away thinking, oh my gosh, that person so needed my help and I let them down because I didn't communicate it clearly enough. I didn't take them through the structure. I missed that step. I missed that really important step. And I can see that now. And that was the point, and there was no going back.
And this is, I think, the importance of that structure, because I can imagine there's people watching this now who are thinking, hold on, but, I've had conversations with people where I totally knew it was for them and they totally knew it was for them and they didn't buy and I didn't get it. And I think this is where that difference is. Yes, your sensitivity got you that far, But sometimes to get to the point where someone actually buys, that's where, an understanding of how the human brain works, which is what to me a good structure is. It's an applied understanding of the human brain and how we make decisions. That's where do you agree? That's where that structure then comes in.
It's almost like so if I look at the structure that I teach, it's almost as though it's the process that the person would take themselves through or should take themselves through if their brain wasn't so busy and jumbled and distracted with lots of other things going on. So it's not like me telling them anything. I'm asking questions to get them to look into themselves, but at things in the right order, so that by the time I've asked the right questions in the right order, they are able to see for themselves very clearly. And there's something that I call the internal yes. And if it is right for them, they will feel this internal yes during that sales conversation before the point where you ask them if they want to go ahead. And if they don't have this internal yes, it's like a feeling rising in their chest or in their body. It's like yes, I actually think I really want to do it, like they're pulled towards you. If they don't have that feeling, then that's why I don't teach closing techniques, because there's no point closing somebody. There's no point adding incentives. There's no point offering bonuses to people who don't already know in their heart that they want to work with you. They're just not quite ready to say yes. Here's my money.
I was teaching this today. Like, for me, bonuses are there for your rational mind. So your heart has gone with it. It's like, I want to get Catherine's offer. That sounds really, really good. And then just before it goes, hold on, is this good value? Am I going to get everything? That to me, when I'm writing a sales page, that's where I put a bonus in, and my bonuses are normally quite rational, as in, you'll have a strategy for your website, or you'll have a conversation or a call about this, because that tells your rational brain, that's okay. The thing I wanted actually is good value. So whereas if someone was reading through that or hearing that and they didn't really click with it, the bonuses aren't going to do anything. So, I mean, that knowledge, I think, is really helpful, because it will help you. Something people can go away with now watching this. If you're making an offer and you want to offer in like one bonus for people who, as you often do, Catherine, who join quickly, or people who join this month, that has to come near the end, when people are already engaged, when people are already excited, and it has to be something that will help them rationally justify to themselves the thing they want to do in the first place. It's not something to trick people into buying a thing they didn't want to buy. And I think that's when bonuses get misused, when it's all like, now I have to make it seem like such great value that and people can see through that, and I think it doesn't really work. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and on the other side of the coin, that's exactly what closing techniques are. Closing techniques are techniques designed to say trick isn't quite the right word, but to almost trick somebody or pressurize somebody into saying yes when they haven't internally, emotionally given you the yes. And the thing is, yes, I could teach closing techniques, or you could go and learn them somewhere, but these are the people these are the people who are going to contact you in 2 days' time and say, actually, I've changed my mind. It's not really for me. Can I have my money back? And it's not, for most of us, we want our clients to be fully emotionally committed to working with us. We want them to feel excited. We want them to wake up the next morning and feel really excited because they've said, oh yeah, I'm going to work with you on this thing. And yes, so if somebody hasn't got that internal yes, the closing techniques just become about beating them over the head until they say yes, and the bonuses start to feel a bit cheesy. But Absolutely. For the person who you see, but the person who is sitting there and who already has the internal yes, who is on the edge of their seat and is just really prevaricating, shall I get my credit card out or not? For the person who's right on the edge, the bonus will actually be like, right, I already know I want to do it, and that bonus looks amazing, I'm going to do it. But for someone who hasn't got the internal yes, I think the bonus is going to look a bit cheesy every time. And that's the nature of being in business,
That's
and I
fine.
think sometimes I see people being a bit sensitive, or I don't feel comfortable using bonuses, but it's because they don't really understand the psychology of it, or maybe they've been in situations where they've seen bonuses used that are used in a more sledgehammer type of a way.
Absolutely. Just to finally wrap this up, I just want to just reinforce just with one line here that when you're highly sensitive and you're going through all this stuff, stuff does come up. But one way that I keep myself grounded in when I'm writing something or talking to someone is to realize that if I feel awkward they will probably feel awkward. If
Yes.
I feel uncomfortable, I'm putting that on them. They're going to walk away, and you've said this before, Catherine, going, oh, something didn't feel right, I don't know why, but also they might start to feel like it's their fault. And so I know this is a really personal one, I think only HSPs will get, if you start to feel your own stuff is coming up in the way, I would say move yourself out of the way and think about how that will make the other person feel, and go, I have a responsibility now to make sure, like, they're a guest in your home. You know, if you're the person who's going, oh, it's a bit dusty, oh, sorry about that, they're just like, oh, I'm feeling really weird. So let's, the stuff we're talking about here, yes, it's for you, yes, it's for you to feel good, but it's actually so the other person also feels like they're in a safe place, they can have that conversation, or they can read that sales page, and they aren't feeling like it's someone who is like, oh, should I be doing this? Because then they'll get that too. And if you take that approach and you go, I want to make people feel like they can say yes or no, but I will guide them to a right decision. And I will, one of my rules is I always, when I'm writing, I always talk to someone as if they're the person this is for. That as in, this is for you. I'm not talking to someone who's going to say no. I'm talking to someone who is like, you are engaged. You're still halfway down this page. You're engaged by this point. And I always talk to that person who is engaged the whole way through. And if you do that, rather than worry about, you know, what if someone is in a different place, and you really follow them through and take them through a process, which is what Catherine teaches, then I think we feel really good as sensitive people, because we get the payoff of the positive as much as the negative. When someone says, I love it, I bought it, and I feel so good about it, or I've had this great outcome from it, we'll feel that as well. And so I think we keep that in mind when you go through taking people on a journey, and it's a journey to a place where, you know, they wanted to be on in the first place, but that structure and that approach has let you do that more effectively.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think we did a tip of the iceberg here, but I'm really glad we had this chat. And hope it's helped people who are watching HSPs. I love what you said, Catherine. You know, we are really good at sales, but mostly when we don't think about it as sales, right?
Yeah, and people have a lot of people carry a lot of negative thinking about sales. You know, they think it's manipulative, it's pushy, it means tricking people, it means being out for your own agenda, it means talking a lot and not listening. And I hear so many people say, oh, I'm scared of sales, it makes me feel sick, I don't go out networking. You know, even if someone's growing an online business, it can take a little while sometimes to get everything working. There's a lot of moving parts. And sometimes the quickest and easiest way to get clients is to just get out and meet people. And people, and I don't like networking because I'm introvert. And actually it's because of the way they're thinking about it, and they've got, like, they basically have got wrong ideas about how to go about it. And if you can see it as, you know, being very connected and really holding a space, you know, what you were talking about there with the conversation, and how the client, you didn't use this word, but how it doesn't serve the clients if you're uncomfortable and you come across as a bit wishy-washy. Because what your potential client or customer is looking for is they're looking for you to hold a really safe and solid space for them, not only in the sales conversation, but also when they're working with you afterwards. And if you can't hold a very safe and solid space where you're grounded 2 feet firmly on the ground and are holding that for them, they're not going to get the feeling you're going to give them that in the work that you do either. And we want to work from, we want to buy from people who we actually believe can help us. And if you're in any way apologetic, if you're trying too hard to not be pushy, you can come across as a bit diminished, a bit weak, a bit on the back foot. And it's not giving people the impression that you're actually, that you have the competence that you really have in what you do.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. You know, I love that we've got beneath the surface here. You know, we even talked at the beginning about setting up your delivery of what you do to suit you, as well as how you actually get your clients. So I hope, you know, watching this, you've gone away with some thoughts of how can you make what you do and how you approach it a bit more you. And if you want more on the sales side of things in terms of a structure, I really recommend what Catherine's got, and we'll have a link for that available for you as well. Hope that's helped. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for your time and for opening up this conversation.
Thank you for our psychic conversation.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.